Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for USports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics breaking down week 9 in the OUA, along with all the action elsewhere across USports. We saw some huge matchups in the OUA. We saw a blowout that I don't know if anyone of living memory or of any memory has ever seen, and some incredible games across all of USports. We'll talk about all that and so much more. But first, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing well, my man. I mean, anytime I get a chance to spend a weekend watching football with you, I'm always doing great. And I think we had another great game day live that was one of our best yet in terms of the production quality, I want to say. So shout out to our friends at Royal Media for helping us set that up. And shout out to the Western staff, the event manager, and everything else for walking us through one of the most impressive setups that I think I've ever seen when it comes to how seriously they take their OUA TV streams. Like, it was truly incredible to see that.
It looked like a professional TSN quality setup they had there. It was awesome to see. It was great that at least someone from Western came up big on that day, because the game didn't really hold too much of excitement aside from just seeing Laurier do to Western what they have done to so many teams in our over the years. We'll get to that game briefly. Let's start with our players of the weekend. Funny enough, for a game that held very little interest, aside from obviously if you're a Golden Hawk fan, everyone in the OUA was excited that this happened, as long as you're not a Western fan. But as far as the product itself, wasn't terribly interested. We're going 3 for 3 on our players of the week. Let's start with the offensive player of the week, because when you put up 60 points on the Western Mustangs, flawed though the defense has been a little bit this year, you got to recognize the offensive output on the Laurier side. Tom, where are we going with this one?
Well, shout out to our guy Ethan Jordan for going back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, but it's got to go to the guy who was throwing it to him. Cal Wither, 25 for 35, 363 yards, 5 touchdowns to no interceptions. He was electric the entire game, and especially in that third quarter.
And just putting up some jump balls for his guys, where just the right in the phone booth, giving those guys a chance to get it. And of course, also, we'll talk about it when we get there, one of those 5 touchdowns to one Keon Robinson. Tom, who's Keon Robinson?
The younger brother of one Tavius Robinson.
And what year is he in?
His first or second year?
Holy jumping. Oh, man. The rich keep getting richer there in Laurier, and we ain't moving from that one. For our defensive player of the game, though, of course, we're going for the whole unit. Tom, this is a defensive squad that pretty much shut out Western entirely. Talk to us just briefly, because we'll get into the game itself and the breakdown of it, why we're giving the whole defensive squad for Laurier our defensive player of the week.
When you hold Western to without a touchdown until the dying seconds or minutes of the fourth quarter, on a team that loves to score the points and can do it really well, on a team that got after the quarterback, that got a few interceptions, Western had 2 quarterbacks throwing in this one. Evan Hillock's final numbers are 8 for 22 for 88 yards and an interception. And Jerome Rancourt's numbers in the air are 3 for 12 for 41 yards and an interception. If that doesn't get you an entire defensive unit as the players of the week, I don't know what does.
And on that front seven, we'll talk about it. Holy jumping, they do some impressive stuff. And frankly, that field goal they got at the end of the half, as we were talking about it, Laurier gifted it to them with some bad penalties and then a weird double tip drill type situation. But Western will be recognized on the special teams player of the week aspect. More of a legacy pick here. Tom, talk to us about what Brian Garrity has accomplished now over his fairly long-standing career with the Ponies.
Yeah, old man Garrity. Just before I get to him, shout out to my guy, Mikey Horvat, 4 for 4 on his field goals for 16 points and a clutch McMaster win. But it's got to go to old man Garrity, not just because he has another great performance here, but he is now officially set a new OUA and program record with 443 total points. That man is a stud. He's been kicking for a very damn long time, and he passes Mark Leggio, another Western kicker, in order to get that one. So congratulations, Brian Garrity. You are the one bright spot in what was otherwise a very ugly game for the Western Mustangs.
I was gonna ask you who held it. I was thinking, well, it's probably Leggio or Haralahu. Shout out to Legs. Shout out to Garrity. We'll talk about that game in a second because we're gonna start in the Royal City where the Guelph Griffins picked up. You talk about a clutch win for your McMaster Marauders. This was a playoff game as we set up for both these clubs. Guelph picks up the huge win, 34-27 over the York Lions. Tom, you had said on our drive out to London, and you said it on the broadcast as well, especially when we heard Brody Clark was going to be back, that it had the feeling of a game where we were still going with Guelph in the win, but they were going to have to eke it out. And boy, oh boy, eke out did they ever. We'll obviously go through the end sequence of events in this game because the roof completely came off and things just went to the high heavens. But let's start because York won't be now making the playoffs. Back-to-back weeks, Keegan Hall putting up some really strong numbers on the day, 27 for 48, 470 in the air with 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Big day for London South. That interception going to our guy, Andre Thompson. Part of them netting 606 total yards of offense, which we'll talk about in the grand scheme of great. Guelph sneaked into the playoffs here, but very concerned about them taking on a pissed off Western team next week. The day Keegan had, but then made that much more interesting with a social media post he put out today. Tom, talk us through your boy Keegan and what we might be seeing from his future or maybe not be seeing from him in the future.
Yeah, there was some talk around the idea that he potentially had another year of eligibility that he could potentially use. I don't know if he didn't dress in his first or second year at McMaster or if he didn't use up or whatever, but there was some talk around that being the case. Well, soon after this game concluded, I saw on Keegan's social media no text, just a picture of a cowboy riding off into the sunset. And if that doesn't say exactly what I think that means, I don't know what the hell symbolism is anymore.
And you know what? If that is how he goes out, it's a great career. It's a fascinating career. And it's one that, it's reminiscent, and this is probably part of a larger conversation and one that maybe we talk about when we do the York post-mortem with the exit meeting interviews or whatever we're calling them. It's kind of, without as much awards attributed to him, Trey Fordish. The outstanding individual play, but just never able to translate into actual serious wins and serious playoff success. And the fact that Mac, after he had left, does what they did this year and is now poised to, be in a position right now where they're going to be on the road against Queens, a Queens team that, looking a little shaky after that game against Windsor. But nonetheless, the end of a terrific career for him. We'll certainly talk about it more as we go into the offseason and we talk about sort of the finality of that York season nonetheless. But part of a really strong day for these York Lions offensively. You know what, Tom? Let's start at the finish because really, it just from pretty much just take us through the last sequence of drives in this game because it was. I forgot through all the mayhem of what was going on the day that me and Dakota had a bet on this one, and it was only really towards the end where I'm like, oh, dang it. Am I going to have to do another half marathon in a week from now? Because it really got to that point of looking like it was going to go the Lions' way.
Yeah, I mean, York came alive here, especially near the back end. Well, York really did a great job of setting the tone. Obviously, they come out with the first touchdown of the game. Guelph storms back relatively quickly off of that missed field goal touchdown return by one Anakin Skywalker Guthrie. And it was just kind of two heavyweights going back and forth. At one point in time, Guelph is up 20-9, and then York storms back, and they get into this game, and it's 27-27 in the fourth quarter with like 2 minutes left, a minute and a half-ish left. Guelph decides to try to kick a field goal, and are reminded why they don't kick field goals, because unfortunately they missed this one. York player brings this out. I don't want to call out the young man's name because everybody makes mistakes, but he brings it out and he fumbles the football on the 20 or 30 yard line for York. Guelph recovers, and your boy Kanye Nethersall gets his first touchdown. That's a passing touchdown after throwing the ball to Marshall McRae for a 12-yard score and what was ultimately the nail in the coffin here. Because directly after that, any time left with Keegan Hall at the helm is always going to make you a little nervous. He drives them right down the field and gets the ball to his guy in Cairo Berry. And it looks like he's about to score, but he gets pushed out at the 1 yard line. Guelph wins, and York's season comes to a close.
What a wild finish it was indeed. And, funny to think that, and again, partly that narrative I mentioned at the start of big day for London South in this one. Andre with the pick, Kanye with his first USports touchdown, not on the ground, not receiving, but throwing one to the quarterback in McRae. Just Guelph is an interesting team. But you mentioned, though, Cairo Berry getting knocked out. Like, again, it was, and we know that we've had some, like this Guelph team in every component has had an aspect that's not made us the most confident. Special teams probably the most prominent. Offense at times just struggling to finish with sixes in the end zone, and we know they can't kick threes even. But a defense that we kept saying that when they're healthy and you just look at those names, especially in the back end, and we were talking with some folks at Western because Guelph's now going to hit the road to take on the Ponies in London. We were talking with some folks in Western, and they're like, this Guelph secondary is arguably the most talented there is in the OUA right now. And Cairo Berry, aside from coming a yard short, 5 receptions, 77 yards. CJ Vincent, 8 receptions, 131 yards. Avery Ford, I mean, golly, after what he did last year, I'm curious to see what the final numbers are because he's had a couple good games, but overall, not what we thought. Today, this reflected much more of that. 5 catches, 145, and the touchdown. And your boy Nick Adair getting a couple receptions for some yardage there too, where it's just like for the York Lions fans, like the frustration of seeing this against the Guelph secondary that is strong, that's rested, that's healthy coming off the bye, and thinking like this isn't the same scenario that we painted against Western, where Western secondary we thought had some flaws in it, and certainly Laurier took advantage of that, but also the nature of Western was scoring at will against York. Keegan had to just throw it up for his guys, and they produced. But you see this against us, like what should be a strong secondary for these Guelph Griffins, and you just have to be just punching the air for the York Lions fans, saying this is what we thought we should have been doing all year long. And you think about the fact that they dropped that game to Carleton, that shootout, however many points it was that the Ravens scored, and I think that like York should have been able to outduel them. Like it must be so frustrating. I feel for these York Lions fans. The promise of Keegan coming in, we knew the run game wasn't really all there for them, and it certainly wasn't on this day. But like what they showed in the passing game, it must be pretty darn frustrating.
Yeah, and I mean, the style of which the way that this team was kind of built. You come into the beginning of the season, you got Tommy Dennison in here, and he's a great offensive mind, and then you got Keegan Hall, one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, arguably if he's not behind an NFL caliber quarterback last year, you could say he's maybe the OUA MVP and all of this stuff. And then you've got Avante McCoy is still there. Mel Casalunga is still there. Some of the more senior guys on this York staff that have got a lot of potential, a lot of things, and it like very much feels like we're gonna sell out for not sell out, but like we're gonna put all of our eggs in one basket in order to win and win now. And then to finish the year 2-6 and missing the playoffs, like I have to imagine that there's a lot of York fans out there that are very upset, disappointed for sure, but especially now with the potential departure of Keegan Hall based on that Instagram story that we saw, Melkus being gone, Avante being gone, and a list of other York Lions in here, as Matt, along with potentially Brody Clark, because I believe he's in his draft year, might get picked up, although he's been injured, but point is, there's a lot of question marks on the players that you currently have and who's coming back and who's not. And doesn't really feel like this was a team that was building for the future. It felt like a team that was more so like we're ready to win right now, and to miss the playoffs, that's just got to sting.
Well, and let's talk about Brody Clark and that defense though, because in similar frustration, this is a defense that on the day they don't have Jaden Dix on that D line. We know what a great player he is, how great he gets after the quarterback, and against the Guelph O line that we know still missing Ethan Pyle, but Maxim Roberts gets to the quarterback twice, an additional sack from a half sack of Sterling May and Kirill Niari. Real good job of them getting after whether it was a boot or whether it was McCray being able to put pressure on the quarterback. Did that seem like a function of Brody's back? We have more of this safety net, knowing that like maybe we can take some chances rushing the quarterback, maybe bringing some extra pressure, and that 28 is going to clean up anything. How did you make of him being back in there, and do you feel that them being able to get to the quarterback against a strong O line was maybe a function of that, even though it wasn't Clark himself getting into the backfield?
I don't think so because in all of the other games as well, Greg Knox has been throwing guys and blitzing guys like crazy just because that's who Foxy Knoxy is. But he's been sending a lot of pressure to try to get to quarterbacks and try to force bad throws so his guys can clean up in the back end. I think having Brody Clark back in there means a whole lot because of exactly that reason, where he can now send pressure and have somebody who's ready to clean things up, or send Brody Clark off the edge who's able to fight with a offensive lineman and potentially beat him to get to a sack. But I don't know that this really changed their game plan all that much. I think that they did some good things. I know that Guelph, once again, dealt with a lot of injuries. There was an offensive lineman who went down. I believe it was Riley Brackenbury. I don't know for sure. But he goes down with an injury. Caleb Sargent makes his debut, comes back, and gets injured at one point in time. The camera pans over to the Guelph sidelines, and you see Donovan Malloy in street clothes, and you see Caleb Sargent on crutches in a boot. And you're going, if that's not the story of the Guelph Griffins this year, like the all of the talent in the world, but it's sidelined because of injury and everything else, it was just heart-wrenching to see. But credit to those guys on the York side getting home to the quarterback.
One part of the story for the Guelph Griffins, aside from the injury bug, has been a function of the offense being good in moments, moving the ball well, the rushing attack, putting up yardage, struggling to get in the end zone. And on the day, aside from the Guthrie play, they get in the end zone 4 times. But as we already highlighted, in terms of one of them is a receiving touchdown by Marshall McCray. 2 of them are on the ground by Marshall McCray. The fourth one is by Tristan Aboud. McCray and Aboud account for 134 of those rush yards and 3 of their touchdowns. And on the one hand, as we kind of talked about, specifically about McCray, he gives them this X factor ability that literally no other team does. So there's the part of me that says, man, you know what? He only gets one attempt to throw it in there, but he gets the 81 yards on the ground and the 2 touchdowns and then catches a touchdown. There's part of me that just goes, that's the Marshall McCray factor. That's just what you get with him. There's the other part of me, though, that goes, like, what the hell are we doing here? Like Willem Arsenault, 1 reception. Jacob Tomas, 2 receptions. Like Jared Tessier, 4 receptions for only 23 yards. I'm like, Harry Vardy, 1 reception for a single yard. I'm like when is I don't know. And there's the part of me that's thinking, okay, they're going against a Western team next week that we've seen get a little exposed. Maybe this is exactly the thing that this team needs. But we saw the matchup against them earlier in the year too, and they didn't get it done. And frankly, one of the things we talk about with that Western team, specifically in the secondary, is that there is a lot of youth there. So you'd think that if you were going to catch him, you'd catch him earlier in the season. Again, there's part of me that looks at that and says, hey, look, let's think positively and look at the fact that you are able to score in ways that like no one else can. But on the other hand, it's like, let's just play football. let's just like, we have a guy in Arsenault, number 5 out there, who when he's on his game is one of the best in the OUA. We have a quarterback in Tristan Aboud who gets the time in the pocket, should be able to get it out. We've seen guys like Vardy and seen guys like Thomas and Tessier have moments. We just can't put it together. Then you add in the injuries into the backfield and the fact that Isaiah Smith, 5 rushes, 60 yards, long of 32. So make of that what you will. Frankly, I don't like it. It doesn't feel sustainable because it just hasn't been sustainable. Like it's cool, but it's like I need something more solid. There's nothing I feel Guelph just is able to say, we can just do this thing and just drive the ball and get points. It's sort of this combination of strong blocking up front and then the fact that you can kind of, I don't want to call them trick plays, but kind of pull the rabbit out of the hat in a certain way. It's just, I don't know. It's frustrating. I'm glad they got the win. I'm glad that they're still going to be playing next week, going to the Western. But to me, it doesn't seem terribly promising.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree with you. This has kind of been more of the same that we've seen, especially from this Guelph receiving core. And once again, unless you're at the game, you can't really see everything that the receivers are doing because the camera only focuses on where the ball is going, and the ball was not going to those receivers very often, so we couldn't really see what they were doing. But the bright spot that I saw was Nathan Stam, first year player. He's 2 catches for the 61 yards. He was also involved in the return game a little bit here as well. He shows some speed and he shows some promise. And I think that some of the young players that Guelph I think will come to fruition in the future. But once again, you start looking at, Tristan Aboud is getting up there and Marshall McRae is getting up there. And that offensive line is pretty much entirely going to be brand new next year. And so there's a lot of question marks here for this Guelph Griffin team, but we don't need to be looking towards the future. They're still playing right now. But yes, I completely share your thoughts here. Yes, Western got exposed this week for sure, but that's one of the best receiving cores in the country, period. So is that really them getting exposed for being not good, or is that just them going up against the best passing attack that we have and going, holy shit, we need to rethink our strategy?
Also, 11 penalties for Guelph. I don't love that. And it kind of feels on par for just the whatever it is that's kind of been frustrating us all this year with this team. But as he said, they're living to fight another week, and it'll be in London against the Western Mustangs to the York Lions. We'll talk about you in a podcast to come. Salute to you all. Let's move to the game that was happening in London, where the Laurier Goldenhawks showed up, and Western showed up in corporeal form, as there were always 12 people in Western uniforms on the field. But that was about it. Final score in this one, y'all know the numbers. Laurier 60, Western 13. Tom, you already alluded to it. Like, we were in the house. The production crew was excellent. Their senior night, they had a really cool, and I'm leaving it to you to give our man the shout out. But they even put together these. I love that he said it was what was it? It was Fortnite character design that he used to make this like 3D graphic modeling of all the players. The senior night aspect, the shout outs to those guys was done really nicely. Slow though it might have been, the crowd did fill up, but then they also filed out pretty quickly as this thing got out of hand pretty early on. At the jump, though, we thought it was maybe going to be a defensive battle. It looked like it was going to be a little nip and tuck, about 8-0 going into the first in the second quarter. But doggone it, like both sides were speechless after the game. Like, Western obviously never saw that coming, and frankly, the Laurier folks were also a little bit like, we thought we were going to win. We didn't think it was going to be like that.
Yeah. When you look at last year, obviously Laurier wins the Yates Cup. They beat Western twice, and they look convincing while they do it, for sure. But there's a lot of people who go out there and say, okay, well, now you've just poked the bear. Now, like, Western's coming back for you, as they always do. Look out. After this win, I know, obviously, whoever wins the Yates Cup, you are the best in the OUA, whatever. I'm ready to pull the perennial crown of the toughest, best team in the OUA from Western and crown this onto Laurier. The What they did to the Mustangs here, and not just, yes, the stats look amazing and everything else, but the fact that there's so many guys doing great things who are so young, and that this is a Laurier squad that's going to be like this for a very long time. And then you look at some other scenarios here, and seeing it live in person was one thing. I watched back the stream again as well, and I'm realizing Ethan Dolby on the day is held to 84 yards on 17 attempts with no touchdowns. Laurier, for a good chunk of the game, was in a 30 front. They had Marcus Tenney and Mateo LaQuintana in the backfield, eating up, getting tackles for losses, or at least limiting gains all day. It was unbelievable to see what this defense was doing to a powerful Western offense that should have been the heart and soul of that team. It is the heart and soul of that team. They've shown and they've put up a bunch of points previously. It was completely shut down. And this is a Laurier squad that took advantage of every miscue that Western did, as Western normally does themselves. They showcase why they were better. They dominated in certain cases. I mean, Tayshawn Jackson at 5'5", a buck 60, running dudes over to get into the end zone. It was an incredible thing to see. And everybody on the sides, both the Western folks who had been there for 20, 30 plus years that we had spoken to, a couple of folks who were on the sidelines with us, the Laurier guys, we saw CFL scouts there. Everybody said the same thing. I have never seen this before. And also, no one has any sympathy for Western because you've been doing this for 20, 30, 40. As long as Western's been Western, you've been putting up numbers like this and dominating folks. So it's your turn now, Mustangs.
What was so staggering, though, you mentioned it already. Like, we've seen Western get beat, obviously, and you and I have both beaten them a handful of times. And I think we both have, both winning in London and at times doing so with gusto. You in a Yates Cup. And then for me in that 2014, when we beat them in the regular season, but then we beat them in the playoffs pretty handily, on track to then going to lose to you guys. But to see them get physically beat up, like, this game reminded me of that playoff loss at Montreal a few years ago, where they were they looked hapless. Like, that offensive line, as you mentioned, being that heartbeat, that soul of, like, that engine of what they do. And there was, I think it was in the second half, maybe sometime in the fourth quarter is my memory, because they were backed up in the end zone. We were driving towards the stadium side end zone, and they're deep in their own zone. And I mean, just to sort of mention, just in connection with that, the day Dawson Hodge had, holy heck, kicking the ball, punting the ball, what a stud that kid is. But where they go to this tight end set that they've been using, and yes, they've used effectively, where they're putting in Jerome Rancourt on that tight end side, and they're running it right at him. And as Laurier had been doing all day long, they're just shutting it down. There's a part of me being like, I get it. The guy's like, what, 6'6", probably like 250, big dude. You obviously see him, plow guys over to get into the end zone when he's in at quarterback, all these types of things. But I'm like, there's a part of me that I'm like, I don't know, like, that can't be your best look right there. And I don't know if there was maybe injuries or something like that going on, but like, even that just kind of just threw me for a loop in seeing that. But it really we've seen Western get beat. We've seen them get beat bad at times. And again, you and I have done it. Seeing them get physically dominated in the way they did was especially startling. And just to piggyback off that, to throw it back to you, I don't know what to make of Evan Hillock at this point. And it's strange because people keep talking about this injury, the shoulder, the elbow, whatever it is. And I never played the position. I can barely coach the position. But when the ball comes out of his hand, the thing is shot out of a jugs machine. He's just missing guys. like and badly. And I'm certain that's part of it all, like the mechanics, the touch on it and things like that. But there's I have this cognitive dissonance in my mind where on the one hand, knowing that he has been beat up and seeing him miss these throws and thinking, okay, that's the easy explanation. But at the same time, being like, that thing's coming out at like 100 kilometers an hour. So the injury can't be that bad because you'd think that, I don't know. It was an awful day, maybe the worst day we've ever seen of him again since probably that day in Montreal.
Yeah, this was a real tough day for the entire Western passing attack here. I mean, Braden Masseria ends up being the top receiver with 3 catches for 39 yards, but I'm pretty sure that long of 20 that's in there was the tip drill that he picked up. So realistically, that's 2 catches for 19 yards. Seth Robertson, 3 catches for 38 yards. I mean, there was a number of times there where, especially watching it back on the stream, I'm watching it being like, we talked about this previously. We talked about the idea of just like having a safety blanket, somebody that you want to throw the ball to no matter what, especially when it gets, things are tough and you want to get play going, get the ball to your guy. And Seth Robertson very clearly is that guy for Evan Hillock. But there's times he's throwing to him, and I'm like, man, there's like 2 or 3 Laurier defenders surrounding Robertson. Like, he is not open. You should not be throwing that ball to him. And I know that he threw it a couple of times Masseri's way. There's some good defense on him as well, but like part of me is kind of feeling like I don't know. I think that Braden Masseri has showcased that he can be a really outstanding talent and a great receiver here. And I'm not saying that he's not getting the ball to him, but I'm wondering if, you send him on a corner or something and just throw up a prayer or throw up a jump ball because of Masseri's height, like he's got the chance to get there. And then even that starts to bring into the same thing that we've been talking about with like the Carleton receivers and everything else, where it's like you have your focal point it has to open up other opportunities for other receivers. But like you mentioned, like there's times where he's throwing the ball and it's just not accurate. And we're going, this is not the Evan Hillock that we've known, and why we put him in so many conversations in top 5 quarterbacks, in previous years and everything else. I don't know. This was easily the worst game that we have seen him play.
And early on, they're obviously trying to get the ball to Dolby and have him rush some, and they're doing some with a certain level of effectiveness. And all the while, they're, throwing these quick outs to Seth, and they're, getting a first down or two. And it kind of felt like they were taking the philosophy of, we need to control the ball so we can keep Laurier off. And that's going to be our best bet of helping out our defense. But even that wasn't sustainable. And, we were talking to some of the Western folks, some Western alumni after the game too. And exactly the point that you were bringing up about Masseri, some of these guys were saying as well, just like, how are you not just giving him more looks than you are? Like, he's clearly your top talent. Like, I shouldn't say clearly, like Seth has that ability, as you said, that rapport with Evan just from their connection over the years and everything, and Braden does as well. But we see that pure speed that B-Miz has when he just has a little space in front of him and can just take off. And just the fact that, it'd be cool if OUA actually could give us the targets as well as their receptions, but it's just, I don't know. It's that exactly like you said, just give them a couple of these shots. And part of me thinks that maybe it was, at least early on, them thinking that like, we need to control possession more than we need to like score big. But an interesting development though, that we were, figuring out after the fact, talking about calling plays. Tom, interesting development on that end, eh?
Yeah. Heard that. Well, first and foremost, we talked about the day that Evan had 8 for 22. He gets, I don't know if it's an injury, whatever, but in the start of the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, Jerome Rancourt goes in there and he stays in at quarterback for the rest of the game. And then there's some talk about G Marsh just kind of taking over things and saying, you know what, we're gonna run the ball, or we're gonna do that. I'm gonna start calling these plays and doing some stuff. And it leads to the first and only touchdown for Western, and it's not. Coach Gaten Richard is one of the best offensive minds, period, that are out there. But G Marsh takes over at one point and he gets back into the saddle and starts calling plays. And I mean, when you're losing at the time, I think it was like 50 to 3. Yeah, I'm gonna want, as the head coach and former offensive coordinator, I'm gonna want to take things over and try to get some stuff done or whatever. But man, just whatever could go wrong here almost pretty much did for Western. And Laurier just took advantage of everything. They had guys who were injured, like Laurier did, and they had key guys who were battling some stuff, and they still were able to punch through, and they were still be able to just convert and complete things, and just they took advantages where Western made mistakes, like Western's done to teams for years. It's just I've never seen Western get the Western treatment before.
Well, and again, it makes all the sense in the world that, G Marsh just might say, hey, look, let me just take the reins here. It's a funny sort of way to contrast after Snyder left in 17, and a lot of folks saw a bit of the drop off and said, like, oh, you know what? Like, does G Marsh still have it and everything like that? So maybe a fun moment for him being like, you know what? I got to just flex a little bit. But no doubt there was some backups in at that point as well on the Laurier side of things. But the thing I'm going to be interested to see about them, and maybe this is just the Griffin in me sort of trying to speak this into existence. Obviously, it's probably on the top of a lot of folks' minds. How do they bounce back from this? They've never had this happen to them. But between whatever might have been going on from a coaching standpoint and the fact that they got beat as bad as they did, I'm very curious just in terms of like how's that locker room doing right now? Because on the one hand, you can very easily, and I'd have to imagine this is the approach they take of like, guys, we got our butts whooped. We'll watch the film, we'll put it on the shelf, and we get ready for Guelph, a team that we've already beat in our house. And it's that simple. But you have to wonder, like, for a Western team that came into this year having lost last year in the Yates, the chip on their shoulder, Evan makes the grand statement. He's coming back. The last hurrah, the last ride. Dolby has this record-setting season. That O-line's looking phenomenal. And it's a game where we saw Sibbald play on the O-line for them as well. Some new faces on the defense, the linebacking core being a little bit of a concern. But nonetheless, like you think of this year as one where it's like, okay, look, it's us and it's Laurier. Then this happens. I'm curious to see how they bounce back from that. I mean, we talked about it with Mac last year in terms of like, or the last couple of years with Mac, with how strong the defense and special teams was and where the offense wasn't pulling their weight. Of, do you get to a point of that there's a little just, little whispers here and there, little whispers. Except on a day like today, it's like it's not even like the defense being like, wow, the offense really didn't come through. It's like, defense, you want to talk? But maybe that's how it starts as well. Anyways, again, for a team that's never been in that situation, one wonders, like, how do they handle adversity? Because they don't really have to deal with it very often.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you talk about a team that, as G. Marsh himself has said in previous years, we are a team that's built to play with a lead. We are not a team that's built to come from behind, because they don't have to come from behind very often. The standard Western formula is we're going to get up by a couple scores, we're going to hold the ball and use our run game to grind the clock and grind your will down, and we're going to continue to score and just make things really difficult for you. On the times where teams are able to score, i.e. Laurier today and Laurier last year, Western gets out of their game plan of being exactly what I just mentioned, and they struggle with it a lot. I think that this is a Western squad that is going to do one of two things. Either they are going to say, enough's enough, there's no chance, like, this is not who we are here. Let's get back to work. Let's take care of Guelph and let's get back into some winning ways. Or this is going to be a team that's going to get shell-shocked and just not understand truly how this was happening. We're the Western Mustangs. And yeah, they won last year, but that was because they had an NFL caliber quarterback in Taylor Elgersma and what he was doing. Who, like this guy Cal Wither, yeah, but he's not him. And oh no, he put up 5 touchdown passes. He throws for 363 yards. So I'm really interested to see which version of the Western Mustangs come out of this. And when you start looking at the challenges that they're going to have, this is a Guelph Griffin team that, well, yes, we just talked about some grievances that we had with them. They are way better than the 3-5 record suggests, and easily can take a game to Western in London here if you're not careful.
And Western knows that too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's not get it twisted. They very much know that's a dangerous Guelph team coming into their house. Tom, I can hear the Laurier fans being like, "What about us, guys? What about us? Stop talking about Western, right? We beat the hell out of them, guys. It's the anomaly of anomalies, right? We need to talk about this side of things." But you mentioned what Cal did. We've been back and forth about the battle of the Ethans, Dolby versus Jordan, coming down to this game. Well, clearly, if that's what it came down to, it's EJ by a mile. But let's bring Cal back into the conversation a little bit, because we'll go around the league, talk a little USports. We mentioned it on the game day live. Anton Ammonrud was still out for Saskatchewan, and as we saw today, it looks like Desjardins might be a little banged up, which then gives you all the credence in the world to say that as of right now, Cal Wither very much is the best quarterback in USports. And as a result, I don't, not that Laurier gets a say in it one way or the other. They don't get to, well, actually, I don't think they get to, yeah, they don't get to nominate who they want teams to vote on as MVP, but, or you know, in your head, they do.
Yes, the teams
Oh,
put up the
okay.
guys who they think are going to win.
Well, then, Tom, all right, then let me ask you the question. With Anton being down, with Arnaud possibly being down, we don't know the extent of it. Obviously, you could just make the case. Well, all right, great. So no quarterback's going to win it at all, and you have Marshall Erickson versus versus EJ versus Pepe. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's still a Desjardins. Who knows? Versus Quirion versus Fagnon, whoever it is out east, and you say, well, it's clearly going to be EJ out of the mix there anyways for the heck. It might be as simple as that, but at the same time, these awards often do go to quarterbacks, and it's sometimes the best case because you can always just make the case of like, yeah, Jordan had an awesome year. Who was the guy putting the ball in his hands? It's Cal Wither. You're that Laurier brain trust. Whose name are you putting out there at this point?
If I'm Laurier, I'm looking over at Cal, putting my hand on his shoulder, saying, "You are easily one of, if not the best quarterback in the entirety of U Sports. What you've done in the short year that you have been here has been nothing short of amazing, and that you deserve all the accolades. But you're
But
going to have to settle with just being a first team All Canadian because we're giving the nod to EJ here. He's got to be your guy. I think with what he's been doing, not just showcasing his ability here, but showcasing that he's able to do this with 2 different quarterbacks, with Taylor Elgersma and Cal
that's
Wither.
it.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're both great quarterbacks, but 2 different quarterbacks with different styles, with different reads, all of that stuff. He did it twice in a row. He deserves the OUA and the heck. Well, he deserves the OUA MVP and to be in the conversation for the Heck Crichton this year, for sure.
All right, I'm right there with you then. I think that makes all the sense in the world. The piece on the 2 different quarterbacks, I think, is awesome. And their performance on the day earned them the bye in the first round of the playoffs. And speaking of, EJ looked like maybe he might have been a little bit banged up in there as well. So frankly, so happy for them that they're able to then like get as close to healthy as they can. And for Western, as we already detailed, they are hosting the Guelph Griffins for that first round playoff matchup. I mean, golly, Tom. Well, no, I guess like I'm trying to think if we did this exercise last year when Western didn't have a bye for the first round of the playoffs, but to think of 2 consecutive years, and obviously the change came however many years ago that it was going to be 7 teams, only one with the bye, so that changes things a little bit. But man, oh man, Again, I can't remember if we did this exercise last year when they hosted Mac in the first round of the playoffs. To think of the last time consecutive years that Western didn't have a bye in the first round of the playoffs, that's one for our Ken Wallers of the world to come through on that end. And also one for our Ken Wallers, our boy Dakota threw out the question of, man, oh man, what is it with like these Western quarterbacks just not finishing with Yates Cups at the end of their careers? You look at Merchant, you look at Finch, and now you look at, well, I mean, the story is yet to be written on the year, but I'm certainly not putting money on Evan Hillock to pull off a win in Laurier at this stage.
But even Faulds in 2009, like there's a whole bunch in there, man.
Fascinating thing. I don't know what to make of that. Is it, super? I think Tim McAuliffe used to say super stat or meaningless number. It's somewhere in between there. Let's take our talents to the nation's capital, where the U of T Blues fell short of what was nearly a major. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll call it a major upset. I don't. This Ottawa team. Holy jumping Tom. This Ottawa team is on a fast track to getting their doors blown off in Windsor next week. I love Ottawa, but I am not going to pull punches on that. Holy smokes. They pick up the win barely 23-16. They're playing from behind in most of this game. And honestly, I'm just so happy that U of T just came out in this one. And we kind of joked about it going into it. Imagine if the story of the year is that U of T starts on the road in Ottawa against Carleton, the offense goes off, and then they finish on the road in Ottawa against the GGs, and the offense goes off. And admittedly, of course, it doesn't go off, but Scott Barnett being the guy out there slinging it left, right, and center, 26 for 37, 316, only the one touchdown. But I don't know, man. I have a lot to say about the Ottawa side of things and just the lack of production on the offensive side for them throughout this game. But what was your read just going through this one?
Well, I love to see Toronto just getting back in the fold here. Yes, they took a little while to get things going, but I mean, you read off the numbers for Barnett. Obviously, if he's throwing the ball, if he's going for 316 yards, a big chunk of that's going to be to Jake Osteen and Chris Joseph. But Thomas Roberts, 7 catches for 164 yards himself. Same thing. If they are over covering or double covering 2 guys, there's got to be somebody else who's going to be open here. And Thomas Roberts took advantage of a lot of those, including a long of 76 here. So, like to see that Scott Barnett was very clearly getting through his progressions and finding the guys that were open here. He took off and ran with it for a few times as well. 5 rushes for 38 yards. It was nice to see U of T just fighting and doing what we've come to expect from them in terms of just being productive on offense and doing their thing here. Obviously, it doesn't end the way that they wanted it to, but there was other games earlier this year where it seemed like they were being completely shut out, and there was not the case this time. They showcase a lot of good things here at least.
Well, and the thing about the Thomas Roberts of it all, like I'm assuming it's an injury, but he ended up missing. Like you go back to that Carleton game at the start of the year, he gets a touchdown, 146 yards in the air, and then we don't see him again until the MAC game, not last week, but before their bye week. So you talk about this aspect of when teams we talked about, K-Mac in that Waterloo game really kind of showing the recipe for saying like, look, just dare them to run the ball, and they're not going to be able to do much else. And when you can really hone in exactly like you said on just those 2 guys, without there being a formidable third option, they had the third option. The guy has just been on the shelf for most of the year. And so it's partly like a major frustration, no doubt, for U of T to think of whatever was keeping him out throughout the year. It's like the what could have been, because you think about that if he's being able to follow up that Carleton game, keep that mojo going against Waterloo, like even just adding in that much more of the offense, that's a win for them. You think if they're able to have him against the York, like that's a win for them. It's really just like we talked about with York for this team, a lot of frustration, not nearly the amount of upside conversation, if you will, going into the season as there was with York, because obviously Keegan coming in, but you know what? Hell of a job by U of T on the year. Shout out all the shout out and credit in the world to Coach DA, what he was doing with this club and being able to, as I keep talking about walking by that stadium after work every day when they're practicing, the energy's always been high. And I think it's just been such a testament to who he is as a leader of these young men and everything he's been doing. On the Ottawa side of things, Tom, we see the return of Romeo Lucier. He only gets the one catch. And we know that Josh Jansen, when he's on his game, one of the best quarterbacks in the OUA. Certainly, I have him in the top 5 in all of U Sports. 25 for 40, 261, the one touchdown. And we did this exercise a while ago, but when you read through, I'm just going to read through the receiving core and sort of the extended receiving core. We obviously know it starts with Noah Avery, Charles Asselin, Robin Coulio. We saw have a really strong season, big game on the day, really bad drop, at least one really bad drop we saw from him. But Tristan Gilbert Thibault, Emile Gregoire, he gets the touchdown this one as well. Derek Garreau-Boucard, who had a really good game for them couple weeks ago, and now getting Lucier back. Like, it is such a spoil of riches on top of the fact that they then can have Asselin and Camara running the ball for them left, right, and center. And I love that they're still just giving Hildebrand these touchdowns on these short yardage plays. But it's just like, I don't know what's happened. I truly am at a loss of words because you know what? There's nice pieces on this defense for U of T. We've talked about it. We love that linebacking core. Like, imagine, like, Western would die to have one of Ilya Linney, Ryan Stewart, or Brandon Thibodeau. Any one of those guys would start automatically on that defense for them. And that's saying something just to think, just like thinking about what that means, like for Western to clamor for a player from another team, like shoot, I mean, they'd certainly want to take Scott Barnett as well. I'd be willing to say, frankly, at this point. But some really good pieces. Devin Crenshaw on the secondary has had a really strong year for them too. Owen Cassidy, we know, is a really strong defender. So I don't want to put it past them. But like when Ottawa plays up to their ability, their offense should be one of the best in Ontario and arguably in the country. And we talked about it. Part of it is just that Asselin has not had the production he's had, and maybe that's then just affected, they say the high tide rises all ships, and they just haven't had that guy. But Avery looked like that guy for them as like this top dog for them. Jansen looked like that guy for them. I don't know what to make of it. I don't want to discredit U of T defensively. But man, oh man, like this is the type of thing where when I pose that question of like, how is Western going to respond? This is the point in case of like, they lose that game to Laurier, Ottawa, that is. They get the bye. They lose the Panda, and it just feels like they've just been, like just gripping the ball too tight. That everyone's just been holding their breath, and everyone's just been waiting for someone else to make the play because everyone's just too nervous because they see the trajectory it's going. And it's that thing of sports that you just have to let go of that mindset, or else it's just going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But that by trying to not be the one to make the mistake, like it feels like they're playing these games to not lose, as opposed to just like going out there being loose and doing what they should do, which is putting up major points, again, especially on a defense like U of T.
Yeah, there have been times and flashes where we've mentioned this numerous times. Josh Jansen looks like a top tier quarterback. For whatever reason, whenever he plays Laurier, he puts up 300, 400 yards of offense and he looks incredible. But there's other times here as well. And it's not just because of great throws or whatever else, but like there's been games where you and I have been looking at each other being like, is Noah Avery one of the best receivers in the OUA? Like with some of the catches and the length that he has and everything else. And then seemingly at will, you read through the names, but like any one of these Ottawa receivers just seems to go off and have a big game if need be. I mean, Robin Couliard gets the one today, 10 catches for 117 yards. But for whatever reason, the past 3 games have really just been lackluster from that standpoint. I mean, it's nice to see Charles Asselin starting to get a little bit going, 12 attempts for 78 yards, but still nowhere close to where he was last year. Maybe that's by necessity or whatever, like we've said, but still, like just the fact that he's not producing in that same realm, the fact that Josh Jansen's not consistently going for 300 or 400 yards and looking convincing while doing it. It's the same thing of why it's so important to watch these games rather than just looking at the scores or looking at the stats. Yeah, he puts up 261 yards of total offense or passing offense. Yeah, that's great on paper. But comparing to where we expect him to be and what we know his capabilities are, this doesn't seem like a top tier showcase. And once again, like you mentioned, there's a lot of pieces on this UofT defense that we've really liked. But this is a UofT defense that has been scored on and scored on a bunch. And the fact that Ottawa struggled so significantly to try and score on these guys, especially after coming off of two bad losses, one to Carleton the Panda, and then obviously Windsor coming into their house and picking up the win. This is, if I'm Ottawa right now, if I'm Coach Belfay, I'm getting in the faces of every Gigi being in there, being like, okay, we limped into the playoffs. Now we have that 7.5 hour drive that Windsor had to make 2 weeks ago. We got to do that ourselves. And you have to decide what kind of team you want to be. Do you want to be just the team that just flails in the last part of the season here? Or now that we're in the true new season with the playoffs, are you really going to start playing up to your potential again? Because what we've been seeing recently has not been that.
Oh, Windsor is going to I don't think it's a shutout, but I'll say it more metaphorically, shut them out because man, oh man, those two teams are like ships sailing in opposite directions, passing their way, one ascending towards the upper echelon of OUA football and the other barely hanging on to their playoff lives right now. One thing of note, and I don't know, I didn't see him out there, and seeing Lancelot Gilbert as their top tackler validating what I think I wasn't seeing, which is, of course, Daniel Briere, which is a huge loss for them. And at the end of the day, like, you know what? Yes, you get behind UofT at a point, but you know what? You held them to 16 points. Like, I'm not putting this on the defense by any means. And like, again, we're talking about a win, but just like we said about Western, of like how you go into the playoffs, especially when you don't have that bye to be able to now recover, recuperate, and get your mind right. Like, Western's a team that I think, again, aside from the fact that they're now hosting a team in Guelph who's been shaking themselves, they're feeling a little off. Ottawa feeling a little off. Guelph obviously feeling a little off. Like, frankly, to me, it's like Laurier is obviously the best team in the OUA by a solid leap. Like, it's no longer like we were talking about redoing our tiers. It's Laurier is a tier of their own, and then it's like Western, Queens, and I was putting Windsor into that mix with them. You were having Windsor in sort of another little tier below. Frankly, like, to me, Mac's playing as good a football as anybody right now. Like, it's so weird right now, just the way things have shaken up. But again, nonetheless, for a team that is still alive, is still going to the playoffs, no Briere is of note, especially given that, I mean, we'll talk about what Windsor's been doing on the ground game and what they did against, obviously, a stout Queens game. But man, oh man, with a date with Mambo number 5 in store for them next week, you'd like to see 44 in there if you're a Gigi fan.
Yeah, if Daniel Briere is not in the lineup, that is a huge loss for the Ottawa GGs. I mean, Riley Hildebrand has still been playing great, and Jackson Brashear is playing some fantastic football. At times he looks, well, the 1-2 punch between Brashear and Briere is incredible, and it adds a lot to that Ottawa GG's defense. Not to say that Lancelot couldn't do that himself, but to have your best guys in there, you want to have that dynamic, especially when you're going up against a team in Windsor that has admittedly struggled to throw the ball effectively, consistently, and has two horses in Mumbo and in Delaney that they are going to feed the ball to. If you don't have your best run defenders, it's going to be a bad time, man.
On the bright side, again, the secondary still been really strong. That combo of Cumberbatch, Ferdinand, playing as good as anyone else, still seeing some strong play out of Nicolas Dion. The sky isn't falling, but it's just not how you want to approach the playoffs at this point. For UofT, Tom, again, we'll do the post-mortem. We'll do our breakdown of them at the end of the season, because off the top of my head, aside from knowing that Barnett, I believe, this is the last game we've seen out of him, and hey, again, way to go down swinging, way to ride out into that sunset, Cowboy. Oseen, I think, might be done. Again, I'll save the conversation on just who's in what year of eligibility and who we might be seeing from them coming off of next year. But just from what we've seen from them on the year, what we were able to see them do today against, again, a solid defense and put up some yardage, though it didn't always translate into points. At this point, I mean, the season's done, but what's your overall feeling of this team as far as the clubs that didn't make the playoffs? Are you optimistic? Are you kind of like, it's not, yeah, you had a competitive game, but the writing on the wall, like what's coming down the pike isn't looking too promising? Or are you just going to be, you know what, we got to dive into it a bit deeper? Like, what's your just general feeling as far as like their season's done, or is it their season's done?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we talked about, even we've talked a lot about with these McMaster Marauders and the Windsor Lancers and everything else, is that the good teams, you can see a progression. From week 1 to week 9, you can see a definite improvement on things. We saw that even last year with the Waterloo Warriors. And yeah, they finished 0-8, but they were a drastically better team in week 1 than they were in week 9. And I felt really good about that. That helped lead them to their few wins that they had this season as well. With U of T, they obviously started off with a bang against Carleton and showcased how good that passing attack can be. But you correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see a growth. I saw a team that found something that worked and kind of stayed at that level the entire time. And truthfully, in that performance that we saw against Carleton, I think if you had that same performance against a number of other teams in week 1, I think regardless, U of T would have come away with that win. But that same performance in week 9, without that growth, without the development, without whatever you want to call it, I don't know how well that would work on teams. And obviously, we've been seeing that week after week here. So I don't know. With this U of T squad, I think they showcased a lot of really great things. Jake Oseen is gone. Scott Burnett is now gone. But Chris Joseph kind of bursting onto the scene here and showcasing his stuff. Thomas Roberts, and obviously we'll have to do a proper deep dive into eligibility and whatever else. But I think there's still some core pieces in here. Obviously, Caleb O'Donoghue, we saw flashes of him last year. He's going to be a young guy. I just want to see, development from this team. I want to see them being able to grow and to expand and to just continue to be great. And I haven't seen U of T grow in the past 2 seasons here. We've seen flashes of greatness in both cases, starting off 1-0 against Waterloo and against Carleton, and then just kind of plateauing there. So I don't know if that answers your question at all, but that's just kind of my feelings on the U of T Blues.
No, I get what you mean. I think we can certainly say though that there's been a growth from last year to this year though.
Sure.
Like even if that like they kind of set the bar week 1 and frankly weren't able to even touch it until this week 9 matchup, even that was a moment of growth for them. And you could even go back to saying that, hey, look, as we talked about earlier in the year, look how 2024 started. They pick up the win on the road, the Coach Adams homecoming back to Waterloo, the huge game, Chris Joseph, we really get a glimpse of that speed, and then they don't pick up a win for the whole rest of that season. You could make a comparison there, but then even to have that a surgence back to this game here today and being able to say like, look, like, being able to go back to the thing that you did so effectively. We'll save it more for the offseason conversation. Ultimately, not the most exciting game at the end of the day. I was happy to see U of T being able to go down swinging because, again, just going back to the culture piece of what Coach DA is doing here, a team that was eliminated from the playoffs, then had the bye, then had to do the travel to Ottawa against a team that you would have thought was going to come out with a little more gusto in this one, given that all those things we talked about of wanting to, have some positive momentum going before you're entering the playoffs. And yes, a win is certainly positive momentum in a certain form. But for U of T to just come out in this game and fight the way that they did and nearly play upset, a spoiler, whatever you want to call it, huge shout out to the Blues. Ottawa, we'll see you next week in Windsor. I don't think it's going to be terribly pretty. Tom, should we talk about these Windsor Lancers?
Yeah, hell yeah, we should.
Let's talk about these Windsor Lancers because, man, oh man, again, they're as good as anyone right now in the OUA. They went down to Richardson Stadium in Kingston and picked up the huge win, of course, on the foot of Brady Lister. Final score, Windsor 31, Queens 28. Tom, I mean, this is incredible. Like, this is like we earmarked this end of the schedule for Windsor, the schedule in general, from when it was released, back whenever that happens, March, April, whenever we do that podcast, of being like, how do you give the Windsor Lancers a week one bye, then have them go to Ottawa on Thanksgiving of all things, right? You know, so many of these teams try to give their guys a break by playing on a Friday. You make the Windsor boys essentially lose their whole Thanksgiving weekend and then say, oh, by the way, here's another kick in the pants. Next, we're going to send you back out to Richardson Stadium to take on a Queens team coming off a bye that defensively looks as good as anyone and should be getting better. We'll talk about why they didn't get better and what's going on in that end of things. And then offensively is looking so good. And Windsor just said, you know what? Big middle finger to you all. We're going to go undefeated on that stretch. I know we picked Queens. I don't regret the pick. And frankly, again, like, to our Windsor folks out there, put yourselves in our shoes. Queens coming off the bye, looking rested, thinking they were going to get that much better, assuming that pace was coming back. And for Windsor, offense hasn't been quite where we've wanted to be. That running game's really strong, and the back-to-back, you're playing the whole year. Put yourselves in our shoes there. I don't regret the pick, but certainly saw Windsor as a live dog. I am so bought into these Windsor Lancers. Honestly, they're my favorite team right now in the OUA, the way they're operating right now with that defense first, the way Mambo's run the heck out of the ball behind that gargantuan offensive line. And just seeing Nick Demoski just still, get a little bit better each and every week. And just that mentality that doesn't matter. If I got to go run it in, just run through a couple bodies, take a few hits, I'm going to do it. It's Windsor Lancer football. It's blue collar, gold swagger all day long. Freaking heck yeah, brother.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I do think that there's, when we make the trip back down to the end of the 401, I think there's going to be some Windsor faithful that give a slap upside the head, being like, "How could you doubt the boys 2 weeks in a row with how they were going, and well, how do you pick against them with Ottawa and Queens?"
Are we going to Windsor? Is that?
Yeah, we might be.
Okay, all right, sick. Let's talk about that. All right, go continue.
But no, this is a Windsor squad that, exactly like you mentioned, fought through the adversity, looked at the schedule and went, yeah, you know what? This sucks, but somebody's got to have the first round bye. Somebody's got to have to do the travel. Might as well be us. And are we going to bitch and complain and moan and do all this stuff? No, we're going to grab our lunch pails. We're going to take that blue collar gold swagger and we're going to go to work. And that's exactly what they did. And Waybe Mumbo, we've been talking about how good he is. 16 attempts for 148 yards on the ground against a Queens defense that, yes, is still missing Justin Pace, and that's big. But a front seven that we were talking about being one of the top in the entirety of the OUA, not just made up of one dude, to do that, I thought was incredibly impressive. That offensive line was really doing their thing in this one. And Windsor's defense just came to play here. I mean, Alex Vreeken finishes with 201 yards passing, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. But the thing I really want to bring your eyes to is 13 completions on 28 attempts. And I think that really tells the story. Sure, there's some throws in there that I'm sure Vreeken would want back, but that's this defensive secondary getting in there, pass breakups, and just making sure that guys aren't open so he has to throw the ball away and all of those things. So I really like the performance of Windsor on the road here for the past 2 weeks, but especially against Queens on their homecoming.
If you forgot about the homecoming pieces, I mean, like, again, going back to the why you would have trusted Queens to win it. Part of that as well was that we thought 44 was going to be back there. You alluded to him not being in there. Tom, what's the word on Justin Pace and what's going on with that? Because it's been a lot of just hearsay from Queens folks, from folks at other schools. It was kind of funny being at Western, and folks on both teams are like, "Hey, like guys being like, he's done for the year," and being like, maybe not. So what's the word that you're hearing now?
The word that I've been hearing is that I believe earlier this week, being I think on Wednesday or Thursday, he had his official hearing. They went through whatever that was, and the final result came down to three total games being suspended, the Windsor game being the last of the three, and he's back in live for the playoffs. That's what I'm under the understanding of. But however you feel about the hit, whatever you think, if he deserves it or not, the end result from the hit against Nick Domovsky was a total three-game suspension. Sorry, Nick Orr. A total three-game suspension for Justin Pace and a one-game suspension for Steve Snyder. And that is a heavy toll to pay.
It certainly is. And there's the part of me, though, not surprised that it took the OUA 3 weeks to have this hearing, where it's like, well, the decision wasn't that they were going to give him a 3-game suspension. It's just that it took them 3 games to have the bloody hearing in the first place, which exactly like you said, whatever you think about it, the thing I hate the most is that this feels like a decision that was a reaction to their inaction. If you see what I'm saying, that they didn't, whomever they needed to get in a room, which they clearly, undoubtedly could have done the day after this had all happened, to determine based on all the circumstances there, or give them a couple days, give them a week if they really need to, because they need to talk to people from the Waterloo side. And, again, you were in the house of the Waterloo Max game, and I haven't been able to connect with Waterloo since that happened. And, you're getting word from them as far as what happened. And again, when we're in Western yesterday, that, we're hearing from them about some of the stuff that was going on as far as like, him chirping to the sidelines, into the stands, and I guess stuff he was saying about, or all these types of things. And again, as far as I'm concerned, it's all hearsay, and I don't want to say anything too declaratively. But again, putting all that aside, it frustrates me to no end that, like you said, that they made the decision that it's going to be a 3-game suspension. No, they didn't. That's ridiculous. He served a 3-game suspension because they didn't do the meeting. Maybe they would have come to that conclusion if they were able to meet originally, and by all the evidence, they determined this is bad, this is serious, and that's a serious suspension to be able to put onto a kid. Maybe he deserved it. I don't care. The thing I find so frustrating is how this all broke down. I think it's malpractice on the part of the OUA. And again, especially for the Waterloo folks out there, I'm not defending Justin Pace right now. I am going against the OUA for how they went about this kangaroo court of a system they put in place right now. I don't know how you let this happen with one of your premier programs and one of your premier players. Maybe he would have got the suspension nonetheless. It shouldn't have happened the way it did, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with you. If it comes out and it's, the next day or the next week, and it's, okay, this is what's going to happen, 3-game suspension, and away you go. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's decisive. This is what's happening, and here it is. If it's accurate, what we've been hearing, that the hearing just happened a few days ago, then yeah, exactly like you mentioned, of course they're going to do that, and that's kind of by proxy. And once again, we're not saying this, we're not saying either way or justifying or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, with a 3-game suspension, there's no way that Justin Pace is now up for any awards. He's not going to be an All-Canadian this year. He's not going to be an OUA All-Star this year. And you're probably seriously hurting his draft stock going into the CFL. So yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that's going to come as a result from this, not to mention the fact that they definitely could have used them in this last game at Windsor to potentially secure a higher spot in the playoff rankings.
So the only reason I laugh is that in talking about the suspension, all these things with someone when we were in London, and I bring up the draft piece too, and they're like, Oh, the CFL is not going to give a dang about that. They're just going to look at the talent and take them. Like, like that's always the funny thing. Like how many guys that got like in trouble at the USports CIS level for abusing like banned substances or stuff like that. And it's like, all right, once you go to the CFL, what do they give you? Like it's like first time. Well, what's their bloody rule? It's like first time they tell you, they don't tell the team. Second time they tell the team. Third time you
Yeah.
actually get a repercussion. CFL doesn't care about that at all. Are you kidding me, Tom? You know better than that. You know better than that, Tom.
Well, listen, it's not a good look anyways, all right?
No, you're right. I think like no, like as far as him just as a human being having to like wear this scarlet letter or whatever you want to call it. And again, maybe it's all deserved. It just shouldn't have gone down the way it did. Tom, this Windsor defense, because you read through the numbers for Vreeken, and I kind of wanted to throw to you like bad game for him, great game for Windsor. Obviously, it falls somewhere in the middle. Nonetheless, I'm curious sort of where you would slant things a little bit in that regard. But, the fact that like I don't know if you have these numbers in front of you. Like, obviously, we know that all year long, Windsor has been leading the pack in terms of getting the quarterbacks. I'm not going to ask you what their final number was, but what do you think the difference between them and second place was in sack total
Oh gosh.
with the four extra they picked up on this day?
Well, I did see it the other day, not the updated version, but I'm gonna say like 10 sacks.
20. Try 20. They have 38 sacks. Mac and Guelph are tied with 18, which means that they have more. They have how do you say this? Like the difference between them and second place is more than the next best team. No one in the OUA has 20 sacks. They have 20 more sacks than the next best team. It is redonkulous. And we keep repeating this whole thing of like the fact that they keep losing guys, not losing them, but graduating guys out of that program, those on in the front seven, and for them to still do this, and our guy Ahmad Taylor really certifying himself as an absolute first team OUA guy on that defensive line, I'd have to imagine, and seeing in consecutive weeks what one in Braxton Johnson's been doing, and a huge play late in the game, just blowing through that Queens O line that is like again, a bit stronger on the outside than they are in the interior for sure. But man, oh man, like coming up with a huge TFL, or I think it was a TFL, not a sack, but just like not able, like they just looking like it was varsity versus JV going on out there. I mean, it's amazing to see. And when they can get that kind of pressure and like allow those guys in the secondary, your Acebo Dotson, your Ethan Johns of the world, right, to just be able to sit back there, your Robert Springers, and just be able to have fun out there. Like I don't want to be too reactionary to this game because also, as we said, Justin Pace not being in there for Queens changes the whole nature of that defense. But like, let me put it to you like this. Like how many defenses are you taking over Windsor's at this point? Like, are you taking Queens's do you take Queens's defense without Pace over them? Certainly not.
No.
With Pace,
I don't.
it's tight. It's tight. You don't need to say more than that. It's certainly tight. Westerns, God, no, you're taking Windsor over them. Guelph, you're taking Windsor over them. Laurier is an interesting conversation. That's really where it is. It's Windsor, it's Laurier. I mean, again, I maybe, and Mac might be in that third slot or fourth slot as well, right? But it's just this defense has been just out of their tree all year long. It's just so awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on the idea of the Queens offensive line. Their strength is their tackles, but their tackles, a lot of the game got exposed by Ahmad Taylor and Liam Hoskins. What they were doing consistently, and yes, they finished the game with a sack each, and a sack and a half, whatever. But the pressures that were there. I mentioned the completion percentage or the completions that Vreeken had, and I gave a lot of credit to the defensive secondary for sure, but he is constantly being flushed out of the pocket and he running for his life a lot of times. So yes, the 4 sacks that they finished with on the day, I have to assume there's double digit hurries and quarterback pressures and all of that stuff. So the what Windsor's able to do here, and like you mentioned, getting 38 sacks on the year is unbelievable in an 8-game season. But you force a quarterback to be in a bad spot to throw up the ball in a situation they don't want to be in, and you create your opportunities out of that. And having guys like Robert Springer or anybody else to go up and try to contest balls or knock them down or intercept them. And this is where you've seen a lot of the great work from Windsor and from that standpoint. And then you're saying, okay, well, what about the run game? Well, try to get through Braxton Johnson up front there. And if you do happen to get through him, Piccioni is playing lights out at that middle linebacker spot. He looks really incredible. So yeah, there's this Windsor defense is playing outstanding. And once again, all of the credit in the world has to go to Patrick Donovan. Coach Donovan, what he has been doing at Windsor since he got there has been nothing short of amazing, but the consecutive levels of production with new pieces and new places, it is unbelievable to see what this Windsor defense has been doing here. And well, there's a few Queens folks who have reached out saying, I don't know what's going on with the offense, or, Vreeken's constantly having to get flushed. This is crazy. I hope that hearing the numbers and the differences in the sack totals gives you an understanding of what this Queens offensive line was going up against all game long. And I'm not surprised by it, but I think Nicholas Henning and Jazz Kyra got the biggest test of their careers with this defense here, and I'm pretty sure Windsor came on top of that.
Oh, absolutely. Just sticking with the what was going on with Queen's offense of it all. Kasari touches the ball 12 times, just shy of 100 yards on the day. You know, a lower output that's a below average game for him. As far as dealing with the Windsor team, it makes kind of sense that that's how it would break out. And in terms of Rican, again, he's under pressure, but just you'd think that, and perhaps why you saw a couple nice balls to Tuioti, you'd kind of hope that maybe they'd get the big man going a little bit more with him under that pressure. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't recall. Maybe they were just keeping him in, or Preston Martin maybe in to block a little bit more, and so that's why you're not getting them out there. But we talk about that all the time with whether it's Basiliga and Waterloo, or just Nicholas Adair, right, for York, and these like big dudes who you just know you can get that ball to. They got the large catch radius and the big body. They can take a little hit. You would have thought that they would have maybe gone to him a little bit more. But aside from that, like not all that much going on with that receiving core. And I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Coming off the bye with things going so well, maybe they let go of the rope a little bit. I really don't know what to chalk it up to, but not a strong day for them. We'll obviously do the round one matchup when we get there, but it's not as good a defense, but your Marauders are coming in certainly wanting a little get back for that game, what Queens put on them and Ron Joyce, week 2 or whenever that was. So, I'm not seeing Falcone. So, I mean, again, maybe it's as simple as that, right? Because we know that he's been, he's a surefire first team OUA All-Star this year. So, I mean, it might just be that simple, but nonetheless, it's a team that whatever wasn't going on here, and maybe what was not going on was they were dealing with the best defense, arguably in the province, possibly in one of the best in the nation. Maybe it's that simple, the Falcone piece of it, but just the same story of what we talked about with Ottawa, we talked about with Western, of not where you want to be. Again, they were obviously so close to winning this one, but much like with Ottawa, it's not always about the wins. The win in itself, there's a texture to it that it comes with how you actually play the game.
Yeah, this was a passing attack that very much struggled. This was an offense that struggled certainly against Windsor. Tuioti, 2 catches for 62 yards. I mean, it's interesting to see this and to see the great work that Windsor was able to do in this one. But yeah, like you mentioned, I'm not getting the same sense of okay, I'm in trouble here. This is the guy that I'm going to go and find, or this is the dude that I have. And maybe that's Falcone and maybe he wasn't in, or whatever that looks like. But again, I've said this numerous times and you've commented on it and things. I I think the world of Alex Vreeken. I think that he should be playing at a higher level. And I don't want to put this on him because we just detailed that he's been running for his life for a big chunk of this game, getting sacked 4 times and everything else. But to me, this is a Queens offense that should have more production to it. I mean, we've sung Jared Kasari's praises for 3 years in a row now, and rightfully so, because he is that good, great running back that's there. And Alex Vreeken, when he's throwing the ball, is freaking great. But there's only so many times that you can see an offense that's got this much potential not realize its potential and still fight for it being so good. You know, I want to see more from this Queens team. And again, you start talking about, and I don't think people, certainly outside of the football world, I don't think you truly understand how important a mindset and a motivation and a just momentum means. When you go into the playoffs on a loss or not playing your best football, you're going up against teams that are playing their best football, i.e., Windsor, i.e., Laurier, i.e., McMaster, who's coming into your house. They are playing their best football right now. And if you're not matching that, I don't care what happened in week 2. There's a very strong chance that if you don't play your best football, Mac will come in and get the win here. So there's a lot of things at play here. Now, once again, you start talking about, and I don't want to get into the preview for next week when we're doing the review here, but there's a lot of things to be excited about, i.e., Pace coming back and everything else. But I want to see this Queens team play to the potential that they have. I mean, they are very clearly, well, I was just about to say they're very clearly at that 3 spot in our tier list, but they're not in that 3 spot right now in the actual standings. So, but I
Here's
want
are
them
not the
to
standings.
yeah, but I want them to play like they are the third best team or the second best team in the OUA. And I haven't consistently seen that from these guys, and it frustrates me.
No, totally. And like, I mean, you know, we've had issues with the OUA website all year long. Tom, you'll be very happy to know that apparently your Marauders only lost to Queens 14-4.
Oh, hell yeah. That's great. We definitely didn't sit in the stands watching 38 points get put up there. That's great.
I say all that because, you know, they lose to Western in the first week. And, you know, despite the 4 OTs, like put that aside from it because they were certainly in the high 30s or like mid 30s at the end of regulation. They put up whatever that 30 burger was on Mac. They put up 32 on Laurier, 44 on Toronto, 58 on Waterloo, 57 in York. Obviously, that stretch of 3 in a row is, you know, teams that you should be doing that to. 27 on Guelph. Frankly, Guelph, I mean, and that was a game that Guelph obviously like was really nip and tuck with them. It's the homecoming. It's the anniversary game. You know, I don't think that had nothing to do with it all. And then you know what? They had 28 points on Windsor. Frankly, like that is in some ways a good outing, but so it is an offense that has clearly produced at a high level, and maybe in the same way that like you know just sometimes it's just the matchup that just doesn't work out for you because we talked about how last year these two teams were neck and neck, and that Windsor defense absolutely terrorized Alex Vreeken in that first week game where they got like 4 interceptions. Bobby Springs comes down with a two or three piece of them, couple in the end zone. So it's just and Windsor arguably, I should say arguably, they lost the game in that playoff game, but like was leading late in that one. It just might be one of those situations where like Windsor's just had this team's number the same way that like Windsor going out to Ottawa just is able to put together these great games. The same way that Ottawa just somehow, for some reason, as we talk about, gives Laurier really good games as well. So in the grand scheme of things, like obviously it's nice for Queens to not have to like, well, it's unfortunate for Queens to not be in that 3 seed. As long as they can duck Windsor, honestly, like Laurier is still the world beater. Outside of Windsor, there isn't really a team in the OUA. And frankly, I'll include Western in that mix. Because these two teams were literally like a 4 OT game. That's a push if you're gonna say who's the better team. And though Queens didn't look as strong as we'd like to see, I have way more concerns of what we saw out of Western in the last week of the season. So they obviously want to put off playing Laurier as long as they can. falling to that fourth seed obviously means that it would only last until the second round if they beat Mac. But frankly, it's Laurier and Western. Everyone else, like as far as that where they are in the rankings, I do think they are up there. It's a tough spot. They'll get pace back. I think similarly as we talked about with Western, you just have to say, all right, it's frustrating. You're undermanned a little bit. Your top player, captain, all these types of things. You get them back, and you just get going from there. Tom, final thoughts on the matchup from Richardson Stadium.
I think I'm really excited for Windsor in the playoffs. I think they're showcasing a lot of really great things so far. And if Nick Domovsky can just do enough in the passing game, just get the ball out to his guys enough to complement the run game and certainly that defense that they have, like it's not out of the question that we see a Laurier Windsor Yates Cup this year.
Hopefully, there's no holding penalties late in that one. We didn't give enough shine to Brady Litzter. Honestly, like him and Michael Horvat kind of like paralleled what one another did. The game winners, perfect on the day, kicking it, racking up the points. I mean, doggone it. I mean, between what you talked about with what Garrity accomplished for his season, what we've seen from Horvat this year and over his career, Litzter, I mean, there's just some great kickers doing their thing right now. Speaking of Mikey Horvat, we detailed it already. He won himself a football game for your McMaster Marauders, who picked up the big win at home, 41-39 over Elijah Barnes and the Carleton Ravens. Let's start with the day Elijah had. This is a way of reminding folks that this was a guy that was embroiled in a QB controversy of who versus him, and Tristan Lefebvre was going to be their starting guy. And again, like, we are not Tristan Lefebvre haters.
No.
Him at his best was one of the best in the OUA. And even this year, there was days where he was looking really strong. But Elijah Barnes, 27 for 36, 452 in the air, 5 touchdowns. I repeat, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And the thing with the interceptions, and I'll leave it to you. I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was the one to Shields, and I'm forgetting
Ethan Stewart.
Ethan Stewart. I don't know if you have a better memory of like the play themselves, but we talked about last year how Elijah just is so strong as a player. We haven't really seen him as effective running the ball as he was last year, but he has such a great arm, as strong an arm darn near as I think we have in the OUA right now. But that, he made a few mistakes last year that experience will tidy up. And again, I'm going to leave it to you to go through the details of those interceptions. If it was, bad read by him, great play by the defense somewhere in the middle. But it's frustrating to think that here we sit, end of the season, Carleton missing the playoffs. And it's like those mistakes should have been moments of growth from last year. But the reason they weren't is he just didn't get enough run this year, in my humble opinion, to be able to say, because the whole storyline last year is, wow, the talent is there, just needs the time and the experience to tighten up the screws a little bit. And we still see exactly on a day like today, huge production, huge numbers, and then a few mistakes that they just, I'm not putting this on Barnes. I'm putting this on the team for not giving him the reps to be able to clean those things up already.
Yeah, I mean, I went through something of a tirade last podcast on Barnes and my thoughts there. And I think, once again, the game was finished and I texted you this. I texted you his stat line like you just read out and went, this is the guy that they were struggling on who to start with. Like when he's throwing up the ball like this, and yes, 3 of the 5 touchdowns go to Frederick Hatchie and things, yes. But like, he's playing fantastic football. The connection between Hatchie and Barnes has been phenomenal in this game and in the Panda game. And you just have to feed this young man. The 2 interceptions the first one with Ethan Stewart was just Ethan Stewart being incredible. That played directly before Stewart had come off on the blitz and sacked Barnes. And the very next play, he picks him off in a great athletic effort. And the interception to Isaiah Shields, this defense, once again, I would love to have the actual DV Sport here so we could do some proper film watching, but it seems like Isaiah Shields from his Sam position is backing up into a safety spot. So you've got a dual safety look, and Shields coming downhill with great hands. He was able to pick a ball off where Elijah Barnes just didn't see him there. The receiver, I think he threw it in a spot where only the receiver could get it. I couldn't remember who he threw it to, but Shields just made a hell of a play to pick that ball off. So I don't say that they were bad or egregious interceptions. Of course, any interception probably could have been avoided, but with a different throw or whatever else. But like Barnes had himself a day and looked really impressive doing it. This was just a MAC team that came to play.
When you talk about the connection he has with Frederick Hatchie and what a year it's been for him so far, and obviously Tristan Reddy, like it's really gonna be interesting to see how the OUA All-Star receiver positions break down, and because obviously we know what Laurier's been doing, we know what these guys have been doing here. Our guy Noah Avery. It'll be fascinating to see where the voters who still waiting on our voting card in the mail. I don't know. I don't know how to chalk that one up to. But for Tristan, I don't know. I'm curious if he's back for them next year. Because I think his first year, he showed by the stats having played in 2 games in 2021. Doesn't record a stat. I don't know, was he, I guess if he's on the field, that's a dress. So I don't know how that breaks down. I don't know if 2 games is enough. But
Well, you'd have to look at last year. He was injured all of last year. I don't think he came back and dressed in a single game. So he has that year of eligibility, I believe.
Wait, no, I'm talking about Tristan Reddy.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about Lefebvre. Sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. No, for Tristan Reddy. And the reason I say it is because, it was interesting to think of how, last year, they have their number one guy in Kasim, and he obviously still gets his numbers. But it's it's this thing we keep talking about of when you have your guy, it's sometimes that next guy who's really gonna be the one to shine because the number one dude draws a little more attention. And maybe we're seeing a little bit of that at Hatchie. And so it's fascinating to think of now all of a sudden, if Reddy is out and Hatchie becomes the number one guy, you start to think, well, okay, is it replicable? And B, who's that next man up? And we talked about Spadaccini. We've talked about what Keyshawn Reed does for them in the running game. But we've been looking at this guy as a strong returner for them. And though the numbers aren't startling, one Nash McDonald had maybe the catch of the year, of the decade, of the century thus far. Tom, I don't know if you want to, do the theater of the mind piece to take folks through this incredible moment by Mr. McDonald.
Well, he's got 2 catches on the day for 46 yards. The 44-yard was one of the greatest catches I've seen. Barnes throws up a ball in the close to the sideline, and Nash McDonald, the young guy, goes up there with the one-handed grabs the ball out of the air, pins it to his thigh as he comes down to the ground and completes the catch. It was unbelievable. I mentioned quickly Frederick Hatchie's day. I have to read out Tristan Reddy's numbers. 11 catches for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the connections that he had with his receivers are truly incredible. And like you mentioned, the young guys in Nash McDonald, Dante Spadaccini, there's a lot of talent that's still on this Carleton Ravens squad here. And if Hatchie is back last year, no matter what, this is, we get into the same scenario that we got into last year. Oh, Carleton looks really solid on paper. They've missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. So I don't know how deep we want to go down that route, but still, there should still be a lot of pieces here.
Most certainly. And I think that's the extent to which we need to talk about Carleton on the day, because at the end of the day, we'll get plenty of time to talk about them in the offseason. Carleton, figure it out, fellas. Let's talk about your Marauders, Tom. Now, number one coming into this game, when we got word that it was going to be Elijah up as the number one guy and that LT Luke Dahlman was down, I definitely got some concern for my and our pick on Mac on the day. I forget how you'd worded it, but it was, I think, effective of that, like, you're sticking with Mac, but the pathway for Carleton is much clearer now for them. And Lucas Barisi, who I think I called Jamie Barisi when we were doing the game day live, 18 for 27, 342, two touchdowns. We know this is a banged up secondary and just defense in general for Carleton. But how do I want to ask this? Like, not to take away from Thalman, but are we starting to see a little bit of, maybe in the same way that like we talk about that, like, what is so special about Laurier? Well, really, it's Todd Galloway. And that, like, for Mac right now, and well, Todd Galloway and the fact that they have all these great weapons around them, right? For Lucas Breeze to come in and, yes, against a deflated defense in terms of their injuries, have this type of production. Your guy in Everett Reed has a monster outing. Even the run game comes alive a little bit, but that classic Marauder thing of just spreading that ball out to all the, various receivers. Again, Jackson Taylor being a little limited. Don't know what to make of that one. Is this a situation where just the sum is greater than its parts in that, like, because I do think from what we've seen between Thalman and Barisi, that, because as you've highlighted, they've made a point to make sure that Lucas gets some run in every one of these games. And I do think that Thalman is just the better quarterback. Is there something to be said to the fact that, like, and it goes back to that piece on Keegan leaving, where it's like the system's actually pretty good. That you put in a serviceable quarterback and it can run. Imagine what could happen if you put in a first team OUA All-Star quality quarterback. Huh. If only they had one of those guys. Do you give more of the credit to saying, you know what, Barisi's just also a really good quarterback, or is it something a little bit more in terms of, like, what the offensive brain trust has been doing there is really strong?
Well, I mean, yeah, like, you talk about the great offensive minds that are there, and Patasic and Jamie Barisi as the quarterback coach and Chris Hopkins and those guys, like, they're going to tailor the game plan and the offensive plan to Barisi's strength, but it's very much like, I'm going to open the door. It's your responsibility to step through it. What Barisi was doing in this game was really impressive. 18 for 27, 342. That's really, and the two touchdowns, obviously, but what I loved to see was the strength and the range of the arm. The 95-yard touchdown pass to Everett Reed, which was just a bomb on the run down the in the middle of the field that Everett Reed got underneath and was just able to take off in. The constant throwing the outs to the field side, where he's almost, the issue isn't that he can't make it there, is that he's overthrowing guys at certain cases. Like, I think Barisi really showcased to me the raw talent, not raw talent, but like the athletic ability that he has. And I was really excited with what I saw there. One of the things that I'm so excited about, like you mentioned, a run game finally taking form here. Braden Kelly, 88 yards, including a 35-yard scamper to get into the end zone. Love to see that. Love to see the big boys up front moving bodies. Quinn Cassidy, Christian Cote, all those guys really looking good. I'm rewatching this game back after knowing the score, and I'm still on the edge of my seat going, hell yeah, boys, let's go. Let's get this thing done. Because I loved the feeling of what this team looks like now, the growth of where they have been and where they're going. Even Aiden Nemeth, 4 catches for 68 yards. And you start looking at, yes, the receiving numbers that are here. This is a really banged up Carleton squad, but they were doing the exact same thing previous weeks. And you can see the growth and the potential of what this McMaster team really looks like here. And especially the offense finally really starting to come alive, and to put up this performance with no Luke Thalman, I am very, very excited about this and what the growth of where these Marauders can go.
And a lot of youth there as well that they get to work with. So again, this is why early in the season, when things weren't clicking as strongly on the offensive side of the ball, we were fairly bullish on the promise of what was to come for next year. And next year came early in the wake of, or in the form of sort of the second half of the season. Now defensively, and what Coach Grandy's been doing, I mean, my goodness, I mean, we were kind of joking about, gosh, I guess, there's, Coach Falls is just going to win another Coach of the Year. There's really no one in contention, and obviously that's Head Coach of the Year. But doggone it, if there were, a Defensive Coordinator of the Year, I'd certainly want to put Adam Grandy's name into the mix. But on his defense, though, we obviously see Isaiah Shields, the big interception on the day, but he'd been a little banged up. Zachary Payne's been a little banged up this year, and Carter Blatt as well. But then in this game as well, senior boy Tony Sestanovich get a little dinged up. And then was it Palmer or both? I'm trying to remember which of their guys in the middle.
Palmer.
It's Palmer, right? The massive Sasquatch just in there, just eating up offensive linemen. A banged up defense. They've still been able to produce. I mean, what's your read on the day they had in general? The 39 points obviously isn't ideal, but I do think part of that is, well, Elijah Barnes doing Elijah Barnes things is one of the best quarterbacks in Canada, but then also these injuries. And, they are going on the road. They're going against a very good Queens team. They're certainly the underdog there. But I'm probably not even spoil my pick. I'd probably take Queens even if Mac's fully healthy there. But it's a very fascinating matchup if it's a fully healthy defense. What do you make of the day they had in general? What do you make of the injuries or the possible sort of nicks and bruises they have there? Because I do think a combination of both Elijah but also this defense being hurt is what led to such a large output for the Ravens.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of times where the Ravens caught McMaster in bad spots here. One of the big touchdown passes to Hatchie, I believe the 77-yard, the long, was a 7-man blitz, and now you're man on, and Hatchie beats his guy, and there's nobody in the back end to stop him. And so at that side, you're like, well, I don't really love Hatchie and Reddy being one-on-one with defensive backs, if damn near anybody in the OUA in that scenario. But you take a risk, you go from that standpoint. Another touchdown of Hatchie's just a blown coverage assignment. He literally catches the ball on the 2-yard line and walks into the end zone. So a couple of pieces to certainly clean up and some situational football, sure, but what I saw from this team a lot is a lot of really great pieces here. I'm fairly certain that Greg Palmer returned in this game after being out. I could be wrong in that one, but I think he came back. But the play that I really want to highlight, and he does not show up that much on the stat sheet, but once again, this is why it's so important to watch the game, is Christian Chukwali. First-year defensive lineman on that defensive end spot. He almost got to Barnes 5 or 6 times. And if not for Barnes' outstanding athletic ability and the ability to get rid of the ball quick, Chukwali would have had a few sacks on this day. He actually technically should have one because there was an intentional grounding call that was made because Barnes just threw the ball away as he was going down. But what he was doing to get in the backfield and just to try to make those guys uncomfortable was really incredible. And once again, showcases a lot of things. Anthony Sestanovich, my guy, Tony, goes out in the game, but he comes back and once again fights through screens in order to make a tackle on Keyshawn Reed before he's really able to get things going. Like, this is a defense by committee, and what these guys are able to do when they work together and they're operating like this is something that's really outstanding. And we talk about the youth that's on here. If they continue that feeling of we're going to continue to work together, we're going to continue to be this great team, and then you start getting guys getting better and better. If Christian Chukwali turns into one of the top tier pass rushers in the OUA, if Greg Palmer turns into the new stud one tech of the OUA, if the linebackers continue to get better and almost the entire defensive secondary that's first or second years, like, the sky is the limit for this team in the future here, but they're doing it right now, and that's what's really exciting about this.
They have to find a Carter Blatt replacement, but in a unfortunate reality of how the season went, you didn't even have him for a lot of the year anyways because him dealing with his own injury. So you've had the opportunity to be able to see who that heir apparent is there. And part of I mean, Carter is a great talent, and we kept talking about how he was one of the remaining vestiges of that 2019 team winning that Yates Cup. In many ways, it almost feels like the passing of the torch now to this new young defense that, exactly as you detailed, I mean, that front seven is a terrifying prospect, especially as you talked about with Palmer and Chuck Wally, and then Lavers and Tony, and just, man, oh man, it's very exciting to see how things shake out on the offensive side of the ball. That's obviously been the bugaboo for them over the last couple of years. Horvat, don't know where he's at with his status, maybe, kind of, sort of. But at the end of the day, we don't need to have these conversations with them because they're a live dog. They're in the playoffs. And just, you know, we talked about with U of T that in the grand scheme of things, even though they came back with the same record as last year, I think we can give them the stamp of approval that they did what they took on the gauntlet we threw at them. They proved us wrong because we frankly didn't know what they were going to make of, didn't know what to make of them coming in this year because they seemed so disjointed at times last year. McMaster, as much as any of those three teams, Waterloo being the third that we said to prove us wrong. I mean, to be able to go from sneaking into the playoffs and then, taking a strong beating to the Western Mustangs in the first round to now being a fifth seed going to Queens. And again, as we talked about, a live chance that if a few things broke differently, that they could have been hosting a team. It's such an awesome thing to see. I don't know what else you wanted to share from this game in specific, but just generally speaking, with the season coming to an end, the growth from not only last year but the start of the year, just like with Windsor, this MAC team has been awesome to see in the second half of the year really take off.
Yeah, this is just as the MAC alum, I can't help but grin ear to ear for how the boys have been playing here. It's really been a sight to see. And one of the things that I'm most excited about, I haven't even told you this, McMaster does a thing where they host post-game press conferences and they post them on YouTube. And because I just wanted to revel in this win, I was watching that press conference, and near the end of it, one of the reporters asked Coach Potasic, "Yeah, what do you say to the people who, had you?" And there's a lot of people out there who thought that this year wasn't going to be great and coming up. And Potasic says, "Yeah, we held on to all those receipts. All those people who said we were going to finish 1-7. We know who you are, and we'll have some cooked up for you special near the end of the year." So I have to assume that the boys saw our predictions and they're going to be coming for us. And I could not be happier to be on the wrong side of that. I am so pumped up for these Marauders. And I'm going to have to do some real soul searching here because I know that Queens next week is a terrible matchup in terms of how they're up. But I'm really high on Maroon right now, man.
Well, all I'll say to the McMaster community is you're welcome. Tom, let's take our talents around the league and check out the rest of the action happening across USports. We detailed these two games already on our Game Day Live, so I don't know how much we want to dive into them again, but from the Friday night, we saw Concordia take out Sherbrooke 27-23. Saskatchewan, again without Anton Ammanrud, picking up the big win 24-10 over UBC. Drew Viotto looking really good at times, throwing some amazing balls out there. And then on the Saturday, along with the OUA slated games, we saw Acadia pick up the tight victory over Mount Allison 27-20, knocking Mount Allison out of the AUS playoffs. Bishops falling again to St. FX in dramatic fashion, 45-3. Fagnon and Bussy really looked like they were just back in the 2022-23 era. Manitoba with a crazy finish to their game against Calgary, picking up the 33-31 victory in a very Calgary Dinos fashion from what we've seen this year. Regina eking out a victory against an Alberta team that saw the return of Eli Hetlinger to the helm at quarterback, and boy, oh boy, was he looking good, hooking up with his guy in Carter Kettle. And of course, the crown jewel of all U Sports football happening today from Quebec City, The Laval Rouge et Or pick up the big win against the Montreal Carabins 16-6 to tie up their season series and effectively to put Laval comfortably back in first place now. Montreal having had that loss to McGill. Tom, where do you want to start in looking at these games across USports?
Well, I really, of all the things that are happening here, we expected great games from a lot of spots. The butt kicking that Saint FX put on to Bishops
Talk about it.
was really outstanding. Silas Fagnon, 22 for 30, 231 yards, and two touchdowns. Not just having a fantastic game in that regard, but as I will pull up here, is now the AUS all-time leader in career passing yards.
Hell yeah.
An outstanding achievement
Let's go.
on this. The previous record being set by one Larry Justanis.
Big Bird.
By Big Bird, as we both know, and to
Give him
go
some
through
jam.
that and to break that record, man. All the love in the world for that young man. Obviously, I had a chance to meet him a few years ago at the East West Bowl. Fantastic man, a fantastic human. Wish nothing but the best for him, and to see him back on top in the AUS, or at least back on top of Bishops, was a great thing to see. Malcolm Bussey, 24 attempts for 87 yards and three touchdowns. Like, this was them getting back to basics and getting back to, this is how we play football. This is what X-Men football is all about.
And with the day that Justin Quirion had, where I just had it up here, 13 for 27, 140 in the air, no touchdowns, two interceptions. Again, I don't think either of us have just quite enough knowledge of the full landscape of the AUS to really speak to, and there's still another week to go, but to speak to just who is going to be, who's going to be hoisting the Loney Bowl, but let alone the MVP for this conference, because it just feels like Silas and Quirion are the best quarterbacks, but they've had this sort of on and off, thing this year, and obviously we know that Silas missed a little bit of time. I mean, on the year by the numbers, you'd still give the advantage to Quirion, but there's a certain aspect of like, well, he's 1-3 against Saint FX and St. Mary's, and the only one is coming up against Saint FX when Fagnon was out for injury. So, like, I think that has to matter. But by the same token, beyond just the injury, we've seen some really poor games from Fagnon this year as well, which is what made him having this outing so special. Part of me thinks it might be as simple as saying, look, and I don't know if I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. I can probably pull it up. If Fagnon can repeat what he did with his boys a couple of weeks ago, next week in the last week of the season, in taking out St. Mary's, a defense that's been so strong in that first outing, he's 19 for 38, 232, two touchdowns, one interception, which, 50% completion percentage, you don't like that. The interception, you don't like that. But against the St. Mary's defense, I'm going to go ahead and calling that a solid game. If he can go ahead and pick up another win for his boys against the Huskies, that might be enough to do it. I don't know if there's really anyone else. Like, we know for St. Mary's, that defense has really been what's making them so special over the last 2 years. Seeing some good things from Shibley, certainly not on the level of where Fagnon or Quirion is. And St. Mary's success, you don't put at the feet of Shibley for what he's been doing. So I don't know. I feel like it might just come down to that last week matchup at this point.
Yeah, I have to imagine that not just being a great quarterback, but setting the all-time career passing record has definitely got to be a nice little ring to the resume going up for why he should be the AUS MVP here. But especially if he comes off of the great performance that he had against Bishops, if he does something similar to get a win against St. Mary's in Halifax, have to assume that that award is his to lose.
Yeah, I think that's definitely got to be the case. I mean, by the same token, I don't know. Quirion, the number, I think we're Team Silas over here. We're Team Silas. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to share what you were telling me you were hearing about Bishops as far as with their long-term potential in the AUS.
Yeah, there's there's a possibility that they leave the AUS to return back to the RSEQ. I guess they have a contract with the conference, and that's coming to a close relatively soon. The main reason why they left in the first place is because the size of their university. They are a smaller university, and that matched up a lot better with the AUS schools. But having to constantly get into a plane and travel out and fly out, the Can West schools know how expensive that can be. And for a small school like Bishop's, that's a heavy price to have to continually pay. So they got to do some soul searching. They got to sit down and look at the books, look at the numbers, and see what's happening here because I'm sure that right now they're getting a lot of recruits out of the CJEP saying, you got a real chance to win a championship and to make it into a bowl game if you're not being recruited by Laval or Montreal here. If you come out and you play in Bishops, you're still in Quebec, you still get all of those benefits, but you got a chance to, if you win the AUS, you play in a national semi. If you go back into the RCQ, now you're fighting the same fight with all of the other teams in there. And I don't know. It's a very interesting conversation to have, and certainly one that we should probably spend a little bit more time on, but that's the gist of it.
And with what we've seen from McGill so far this year, obviously we know AUS RSEQ football not built exactly the same, but again, I think Bishop's success in the RSC in the AUS, it hasn't been just a function of, oh, the AUS is just is just bad football, whatever. Bishops, I think, brought some real talent into that conference, especially these last couple of years with Quillion. So in some ways, send them back to the RCQ. McGill keeps on their ascension. It could create a really interesting dynamic, and as well with Desjardins being his last year. No doubt Laval's going to have someone waiting in the wings, but interesting. Interesting to think about that possibility. Tom, we got to finish with Laval and Montreal, so let's go out to Can West. We already talked about this one on the game day live preview, but Saskatchewan 24, UBC 10, again, off the jump. No Anton Ammonrood. Riker Frank with the big game on the ground. Daniel Wee, my goodness, the incredible day he had, that jet sweep play that you talked about, just incredible athleticism by him. On the flip side, Drew Viotto really just showing why he is the future of this program. His guy in Shamar McBean coming up with some big plays for him. Trey Montour, and of course we talked about on the defensive side for UBC, our guy in Kinsale coming up big, and for Saskatchewan, your boy and Seth Hundaby having a great game. What are your kind of just general news and notes from this matchup here?
Well, like you mentioned, the game finishes with 24 points for Saskatchewan. All 24 points are scored in the second quarter of this game. And if you're Saskatchewan Husky fans, I'm sure you're looking around being like, yeah, that's great and all, but like we'd really love if Anton was back. And apparently he is close to returning. The word was that he was on the depth charts initially, but was a last minute scratch because he wasn't 100% healthy or whatever the case looks like. So he is close to returning for the Saskatchewan Huskies. Wouldn't be surprised to see him potentially next week, or maybe they save him for the playoffs in general here, but he should be back before the end of the year, and that'll have a huge boost to these Huskies. For UBC, Drew Viotto coming alive here is nice, but as I talked about it on the podcast or on the Game Day Live, might be a little too late with how long it's been taking him to really get going here.
Let's head out to the game taking place from Manitoba. I said go out as if we were heading further west than that. Let's head more centrally to the game in Manitoba, where again, a very Calgary Dino type game in this one. Manitoba 33, Calgary 31. Off the jump, the day for the rushing attack for Manitoba, as strong as they've been all year. Braden Stubbs, the huge outing, 19 attempts, 120 on the ground. Tuchinski showing why he's one of the great dual threat quarterbacks that we've had over the last bit of time. Only 49 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, one being one that he punches in, but a really strong day for him in the air as well. 22 for 32, 1 touchdown, 1 interception with 333 yards. On the other side, David Jordan with a good outing, 22 for 30 with 315, two touchdowns. Of course, the major one coming late in the game, hooking up with his guy in Zion Grant, having a huge year for himself, 78 yards to put them back in position to be able to hopefully tie up the game. They get the three down, pardon me, they get the three and out to put themselves in position for a game tying field goal, and it goes wide left. They get the Rouge. Unfortunately, they needed three. They fall 33 to 31. They fumble the ball twice and lose it twice. They get a mess of penalties. Manitoba gets a mess of penalties in their own regard. Bit of an ugly game in this one. It felt it felt a bit of like where both these teams have been at, of just a lot of top talent. Manitoba perhaps that much more so, but just ugly in stages, not really getting a strong, clean 4 quarters of football.
Yeah, we've seen this. We talked about this previously. We've seen the Dino squad that has been in so many tight games this past season. I think they've lost almost all of them. You take Regina to overtime here. You get into a tight game with Manitoba. You do all of this stuff this past year, and you just can't quite seem to come away with it. And it probably goes back to speak on, yeah, you've got a lot of fourth-year players. You also got a lot of first-year players that just need to learn how to properly win and go from there. So I'm sure a frustrating season so far with the Calgary Dinos, considering how close that they have been, and this one coming off of a missed field goal at bare minimum to get them to overtime as well. But Jackson Tuchinski doesn't always look the prettiest here. He's normally good for 1 or 2 interceptions as he's throwing it, but the dude is such a great athlete. He follows it up, and to have 333 yards in the air and the touchdown to Braden Smith and then 2 on the ground, just showcasing why he is as good as he is. Braden Stubbs finally getting going here as well. 19 attempts for 120.
Let's finish off with the game that saw your boy and Eli Hetlinger return and look so strong for the Alberta Golden Bears, almost pulling up the upset home against Regina. A Noah Peltier-less Regina squad, but that didn't prevent Marshall Erickson from still looking as strong. The yardage isn't there as you'd expect, but he still gets in the end zone 2 times. Nicholas Sirleaf catching the ball from Sibin, still able to have big production, but Eli 21 for 29, 238, 2 touchdowns, and his guys in Carter Kettle and Chevy Thomas having some huge plays for him in the air. What do you chalk it up to all these weeks into the season, now going to the final week of Can West action? Trey Ryder looked really good. Eli's looked really good. Is it just a young team recognizing that, you know what, we're better off using this year to figure out who our guys versus over investing in one and not really figuring it out? I mean, we are on record multiple times saying we don't like when teams do that. But in a year where like there's clearly a top hierarchy to the Can West, where you say, look, it's a new coaching staff. It's these 2 quarterbacks, both very talented. Let's just give them a bunch of run and figure it out. What do you make of it after all these weeks? And of course, take as many victory laps as you want about Hetlinger, because doggone it, we certainly know how good this Regina defense is. And for him to have the day he did and nearly pull off this win was an awesome day for him. Though obviously he would have liked to have gotten it done.
Yeah, yes, we are still on the same page in terms of we don't love it when there's a 2 quarterback system or whatever else, but I don't actually fault Coach Bone or the rest of that Alberta staff, because at the time when they made the switch to Trey Ryder, they hadn't won a game yet, and they were playing against a UBC squad, and you're saying, you know what, let's try something, and then they get that win, and you say, well, we're not going to just immediately abandon ship. You have to ride the hot hand a little bit here and see what's happening. And he has another good game. But Eli, to me, is just clearly the quarterback here. 21 for 29, 238, and 2 touchdowns. He looks really impressive in this game. And, you go on the other side, and it's Owen Siben for the Regina Rams here, not Noah Peltier. He goes 20 for 30, 246, no touchdowns and 1 interception. We've had this conversation before, and this was a very prominent conversation that people were having last year. Is Noah Peltier a good enough quarterback to win you a championship? And while they did win the Hardy Cup last year, a lot of people are not convinced on Noah Peltier and certainly wanted to change things up and to see how things are going. Despite all of that, Regina gets the win, and for the first time in program history, The Regina Rams are 6-1.
That's an awesome thing to behold. And obviously, next week we get the rematch. Battle Saskatchewan, of memory serves. And, it might be a little uglier than we'd hope if both of those quarterbacks are out for these clubs, but doggone it. What an outing that's going to be nonetheless. Or no, we don't get Battle Saskatchewan. My apologies. I had that one mixed up. Tom, we talked about Sherbrooke Concordia, an exciting game nonetheless. I don't know if you want to give a real quick rundown. No, we'll go past that because we know what we got to talk about. It is Montreal at Laval, 16-6 for the Rouge et Or. A classic battle between these two clubs. The defenses proved true on the day. As we said, Arnaud looked a little dinged up in there. The fishing is all heck, 22 for 29. Not a ton in the air, 174 on the interception. On the other hand, though, Pepe, my goodness. I mean, rough day for him at the office, turned the ball over 4 times. We see that rushing attack for Laval looks strong as well. But instead of it being the combination of Mathieu Roy and Angel Vital, we saw Ouellette get off and running for them as well. You said Harold Misen had to have a good game. He gets the interception on Desjardins. And that defense, that rush defense for Laval, just proving why, it's unmatched. We obviously talked about what Laurier was able to do with that 30 front, slowing down that Western running juggernaut. But my goodness, no one even touches what this Laval team can do right now. What was your read on the matchup this afternoon from these clubs?
Yeah, a defensive struggle as it normally always is. You can have the best guys in the conference, and Montreal has with guys like Jonathan Senecal and everything, and still somehow, some way, this game always comes down to great defenses. Pepe Gonzalez, 23 for 42, 277, 1 touchdown, and the 4 picks, like you mentioned here. Not a great outing by any means, but even the special teams really struggled in this one. Philip Boyer, kicker for Montreal, goes 0 for 1 on his field goals, and Philippe Forteza, 2 for 5 on field goals himself, but he hits a 54-yarder as one of the ones that he makes in this one. So lots of things that are up in the air for this, for both of these squads here, and certainly you always need to have a big play, and getting a big play with the block and the recover for Laval and the lone touchdown on the game. I mean, that's certainly something to be proud of, but this is a game that's going to come down to any point that's left on the table. It's going to be a what-if scenario here. And you can play outstanding football offensively and defensively, but if something goes wrong on the special teams, that's often enough to really put the nail in the coffin in this one. So Laval comes out on top, and they look, I don't know, they look impressive while they do it.
And it's an interesting point in thinking of the would-be Vanier Cup if it ends up being one of these two clubs against whomever comes out of the OUA, Laurier, where we obviously see the athleticism, the speed, and the just general immense skill that Laurier brings to the table. They're certainly not a one-trick pony, but if you were to sort of paint them with a broad brush, you'd say, what do they do better than anyone? Well, it's that passing attack. It's those receivers and everything like that. And obviously, just taking Laval as the example in this case, the possibility of that rematch this year, Desjardins is as good a quarterback as we have right now. Whether it's Cool, it's Galidet. I mean, they have some really strong receivers, but it's that front seven play. It's that O-line play. These big dudes up front that are able to just grind you out on the offensive side of the ball and be able to open up some opportunities for that run game to happen and just shut you down just fully, completely. So it's the battle of the I don't know how you want to say it, the sizzle versus the substance. Not to say that Laurier lacks substance, but that sort of brute force that is Laval versus the more styled, exciting plays that Laurier brings to the table. Not to count out Montreal. I mean, again, obviously we saw them come up with the win, but that run defense we've seen be a little exposed. That rushing attack, we really, again, beyond the fact that Laval is just a juggernaut in that aspect of it defensively, really didn't see much out of them on that side of the ball. You know what, though? I mean, at the end of the day, for Pepe, this is clearly his worst game that he's had in his short career so far. So, you know what? He'll learn from it. He's kind of spoiled by having that first win against Laval, so to speak. So I'm not counting them out by any means. Tom, any other just thoughts, news and notes from this one? Obviously, not getting to watch it with it being on TVA. I'm sure hoping there's going to be a YouTube highlight or the whole game that comes online sooner than later. But just anything else you want to comment from this one?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I shouted out the right person. Xavier Thibodeau getting the block and the recovery in the end zone to get the lone touchdown on the day for the Laval Rouge-Or. Great job by him. Once again, we talked about how impressive it was to have a regular season home victory streak like Western had, and that really just showcases how difficult it is to win in London. I don't think Laval has the same. I'd have to just double check it. But when you've got and confirmed 21,300 people in attendance, playing in front of that is always going to be difficult here. And now that they've got that victory, and because of that McGill loss, if the two teams finish how we think they are, the first ever Dussault Cup will be held in Quebec City again, and that's never an easy place to win. So shout out to the Laval Rouge-Or, especially shout out to their media team who had us on their Instagram, which was the coolest damn thing ever. But another outstanding victory for the Rouge-Or.
Well, Tom, I think we'll call that a wrap. That is the end of the regular season in the OUA. It is win or go home. Only 7 teams remain. We have one more week of regular action from the other 3 conferences. Final thoughts on what we saw this weekend across USports, Tom?
The cream is certainly starting to rise to the top in a lot of cases here. Laurier with the most dominant fashion win, obviously showcasing why they are the number 1 team in not just the OUA, but in the country. McMaster looking really solid. Windsor looking really good here as well. There's a lot of teams to be out on the look for here, but look for a couple of these teams like Western and Queens, maybe Ottawa, to lick their wounds and say, you know what? This is not a representation of who we are. We'll show you who we are in the first round of the playoffs. The real season starts now in the OUA at least, and we'll have to wait another week for everybody else. But folks, if you thought you saw good football before, you ain't seen nothing yet because it's really just about to start.
You want to take Friday off work and fly out to St. Mary's for a little
Don't tempt me. I will do it.
I love that that's Friday at 7 p.m. That is awesome. Oh my goodness. You're absolutely right, though. The matchups we have in store, we will break down in more detail. We'll talk about these other games around USports, the playoff implications, the seeding implications that those have for those conferences, and so much more later on this week, right here at the 55.